Welcome to Module 31 of AP Environmental Science, talking all about human nutritional needs. The first big topic of this module is undernutrition versus malnutrition. And these are two terms that students often get mixed up. Undernutrition just means not getting enough calories. And when you don't get enough calories, your body can't develop properly. So especially if young children don't get enough calories, they're often going to have stunted growth, lower IQ, slower brain or delayed brain development. Malnutrition, you could be getting a ton of food into your body, but if that food is not the proper combination of calories, you're going to have a lot of the similar issues to somebody who is undernourished. And this leads into this idea of food security. So being able to go home and know that there is going to be food available to be able to eat, or knowing where your next meal is coming from, that's being food secure. And food insecurity means you don't have adequate access to food. I also want to talk briefly about this phenomenon called a food desert. And that happens a whole lot in the United States, especially in cities, where it takes a huge distance between where you live and where your closest food source is. So your closest grocery store, supermarket, farm stand, that kind of thing. So if there's a huge distance, if you cannot quickly and easily go get food, you live in a food desert. And I'm talking about actual supermarket food, not fast food. Oftentimes these food deserts are actually found in very poor communities. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Another term that I'm going to just throw at you here is called overnutrition, which is a form of malnutrition. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Overnutrition means you're getting over, so way more than the appropriate amount of calories, the appropriate amount of nutrition in your body. And this can lead to being overweight, it can lead to being obese, and those two conditions lead towards a whole lot of diseases, including high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, all of that. So it takes a bit of a balance. You don't want to be you don't want undernutrition, you don't want overnutrition, you want to be somewhere in the middle, but you want to make sure you're getting the correct calories so you can avoid malnutrition. It's a tough balance. A lot of people struggle with it. Something that takes a long time to truly master. So listen to your mom and dad, eat your vegetables. All right, switching gears just slightly here. The amount of food that's produced across the world, primarily our diets, everywhere in the world, about half of it comes from corn, rice, and wheat. So those three kind of grains are all put together. The next largest component of the human diet is meat. For better or worse, humans eat a lot of meat. And there's this trend where when a country increases its wealth, they also increase the amount of meat that they consume. And that's because meat is very expensive to produce. So if you can have more money to be able to produce more meat, you're probably a wealthier country. Now, there is a bit of a drop-off. So once countries hit a certain point, they tend to start eating a little bit less meat. Now there's a variety of reasons for it. Perhaps it's because they're realizing that meat has a huge environmental cost. It takes a huge amount of land area to produce the same number of calories of meat as it does to produce that same number of calories of grain. So perhaps it's an environmental conscious, perhaps it's a health thing where they're realizing that maybe we don't need to eat so much meat, maybe we can be just as healthy, eating a little bit lower on the food chain. There's a lot of factors that go into it. All right. And then the next part of this module talks about why does undernutrition and malnutrition happen in the first place? And the biggest reason for this is poverty. And that's because people don't have the money, they don't have the resources available to purchase this food or to grow the food that they need to eat in order to be healthy. Makes total sense. They've got pretty big issues going on. Making sure that they eat enough is one of them, and that takes a huge amount of their daily time and resources. Political unrest and government policies are also big factors. Government policies can create subsidies to make it artificially more or less expensive to produce certain types of food. Government policies can also create artificial food shortages, which will increase the price of food so that way farmers can make a little bit more money. Now, I'm not blaming this on farmers. I have farmers in the family that I absolutely adore. What the problem comes here is when the food cost increases too much, people can't afford it anymore. And that leads to a lot of riots, it leads to a lot of protests, and it can lead to violence and wars. This happened in Egypt and Haiti in 2008, and it has also happened to other places in the world. So political unrest, that can lead to undernutrition and malnutrition because people are protesting, they're not working, they're not producing this food, they're not able to go shop for it. Livestock is the other big piece. So I was just talking about meat consumption briefly. In the process of producing meat, you need to be able to feed those animals something. And oftentimes those animals are being fed things that could have been used to feed humans. So instead of feeding cows a bunch of grain and soybeans and what kind of things, that grain and soybeans could have been used to feed people. And that could address some of the under and malnutrition. All right, one last little bit. Global grain production. So the amount of food, because remember grain makes up half of the human diet, it's been increasing pretty significantly. And this is just the last, 60, 70 years? As that grain production has been increasing, the human population has also been increasing. So if we alter this graph, so that way it's per capita or per person, so how much grain is produced per person every year throughout the entire world, it will be a straight line. And that's terrifying. So the amount of grain produced per person is leveling off. However, in recent years, more of that grain is actually being used, instead of feeding a person, it's being used to feed livestock, which is kind of reducing the amount of food available per person. So that raises some really interesting points to reflect upon. And that's the end of the module. I feel like it has a lot of information in here. Make sure you understand what's going on with the difference between overnutrition, undernutrition, malnutrition, and kind of why those things happen. Make sure to take good notes and make sure to bring your questions to class.